Hi, and welcome to Random Rogers Big Picture for the week of February 8th. Just one thing on the agenda this week that will lead to something else. A reader pointed me to an article on Index Universe from Jim Wyant. People are dumber than they look. It's a bit of a tirade against active management. Buy and hold at the lowest possible cost, as broadly diversified as possible in the past, now, and forever. If you think otherwise, especially now, you may want to consider taking off those big shoes and that funny hat with the bells. And then he says something else. All of this ridiculous, ludicrous hubbub right now at the worst possible time to be preaching that active sermon. Woo! That was something. So, it's really quite a tirade. And I think it comes from what I believe is a very limited viewpoint. Everyone comes to the table with certain opinions and biases based on, whatever their background and their personality. But he also talks in there about, it being crazy to trade yourself silly or whatever. Some people actively trade very successfully. Let's not lose sight of that. I'm not one of those people. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But some people do. Other people do other forms of active management stuff very well, and some people don't. But it's to think that only one thing can work, that just doesn't make sense. Obviously, whatever it is you do, you probably think it's the best way to go, and for you it probably is. For some people, buy and hold at the lowest possible cost, as broadly diversified as possible. That is the right thing. That is the best thing that they could do, but not everyone. And to apply one thing is right for everyone, that makes no sense. One reason you're here is only logical, is you must think I've got something to offer. Well, what I do is active management. It's not active trading, I don't think, but it's active management. It's a top-down style. If you go read other people, if you go read Bob Friedland, you must have some interest in trying to pick something up about bottoms-up stock analysis. All of those things are valid, and he's implying otherwise. I don't understand why he would do that. And so what this leads me to is the notion of bias. I got into a debate Seeking Alpha once with Will McClatchy from ETF Zone. I wrote an article, I guess for my blog, saying something to the effect of a flaw with fixed income ETFs is that you can't know what your yield's going to be. You're not locking in a yield. It fluctuates, and occasionally a yield is very attractive. Sometime in 2006, 2-year treasuries were yielding 5% or better, and I bought quite a bit at the time, thinking, boy, 5% for 2 years, that's pretty good. And so I loaded up. There'd be no way to recreate that in an ETF. And that was my point. He then came back with some sort of thing about, when you buy a 5-year ETF, your duration is always 5 years, and so you can always align your liabilities, some sort of academic thing like that. And, my reply was, well, that doesn't do any good for clients. A client needs to know, reasonably speaking, do you want to know what your income's going to be for the next couple of years as best you can? Well, yeah, you probably do. If you work, you don't want, if you know you're going to get $100,000, it does you no good to know you're going to get $1,000 some months, $8,000 other, you can't live that way. And so for a client who needs income from the portfolio, you want to minimize that as much as possible. And all ETFs doesn't do that. All done. Trixie, all done. All ETFs doesn't do that. And so he had no frame of reference for for making decisions with other people's money. So it's kind of a bias. Jim, I'm assuming, has never managed money for anybody. He's coming at this as a journalist. I don't know if he's got any sort of training, academic training in the field or not. But that might be another gap in his, experience and contributing to his biases. As far as, I've got gaps and flaws too. Everybody has gaps and flaws. I came up as a trader. Most of, before I got into this part of my career, I was a trader. I think that's a great experience, and then I read along the way. Some stuff stuck, some did not. Just like anybody else, not everything that you read about will stick. And I built a process based on taking in, stuff from everywhere, like I talk about. Hopefully you do, and that was, how I built my process. For the good and the bad, and there's good and bad to everybody's process and result. That's where I am. I'm not academically trained in the field. I've got a BA in economics, which is not preparation for portfolio construction. I'm not a CFA. None of that has been an issue, and I'm convinced none of it will ever be an issue. I've got my finger on a certain pulse, but there are certain experiences that I don't have, most notably the academic stuff. So that's important. Flaws. I've got flaws as well. Everyone has flaws. My flaws, and I've talked about this plenty of times, is I'm a sucker for a good story. So, they all sound good. Oh, what? It does what? Oh, well, that sounds great. That's why I keep away from investing in too many great stories. Because, again, to me, they all sound great. So I really minimize the exposure to great stories. Just on the assumption I'm not going to get a lot of them right. And if you think about top-down, being into the market, out of the market, that becomes the most important thing. Overweight, underweighting sectors, that becomes the second most important thing. Country, also tied in equally with sectors in terms of how important it is in the process of building a portfolio and navigating the market. If you're a top-down person. If you're a bottom-up person, then probably none of that would matter to you. Also embedded in here, buy and hold at the lowest possible cost in the past, now, and forever. Okay, this brings up another point that I think is just a gap in the logic, which is, and that was quoting Lyons' piece again, which is investing does involve. Some of this is a repeat from my comment on Thursday night on the blog, but one point I made was, in terms of evolution, before 1958, for I don't know how many years, maybe forever, dividend yields of equities were greater, collectively, were greater than the yield on the 10-year Treasury. In 1958, that flopped. And now, it's only been a couple of months, so I'm not prepared to say that it's flip-flopped forever. But after going from stocks yielding more to bonds yielding more for 40 or 50 years, now we may be back to stocks yielding more than 10-year Treasury. Certainly that's been the case for the last, couple of few months or whatever. That is an evolution of sorts. The fact that ETFs exist is evolutionary in terms of how you can construct portfolios. In the past, if you wanted to do what I do in terms of going by sector but not picking individual stocks, you had to go with actively managed mutual funds, and so there you never knew what was in the portfolio. The turnover in an ETF or the sector or the index composition of a sector does not change in such a way that you don't know what's going on. You can follow the holdings through the website, and so you can pretty narrowly assess what it is that you own in terms of building the portfolio. And this gets into tailoring specific effects, which is another thing apparently he doesn't believe in, as broadly diversified as possible. Broad, I like to get there by using very narrow products. To me, it allows for specifically creating a desired effect in terms of volatility, in terms of cap size, in terms of yield, in terms of style, in terms of sector, in terms of country. I got to be missing a couple, but you get the idea. All of these things can be managed, which is, again, that's how I come at it. That's where I think I can add value for my clients over the course of an entire stock market cycle. That is, and I'll finish with what I started with. For me, that is what I think is the best way to go. I don't say anyone else necessarily should do it that way. I think my way is pretty easy relative to other ways, other than just buying SPY, IWM, and EFA. That certainly would be easier, but you can't create really any effect in there whatsoever. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Have a great weekend.